Alright, so thanks for coming to the workshop. It's Transitioning Power in Tennessee. My name is Tom Torres, and I'm staff with Statewide Organizing for Community Empowerment, SOCM, and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
I'm Lauren Bush. I'm the SOCM Green Collar Jobs Chair.
Cool.
Sure. SOCM has been around since 1971. We're in our 41st year, and green collar jobs.
It's all good.
Okay. Well, there are like 8 local chapters of SOCM, as well as 3 issue-based committees. Besides green collar jobs, there's Social Justice Committee and Energy, Ecology, Environment, or E3 Committee.
Cool. Yeah, so SOCM is just over 40 years old, and it was started in East Tennessee by residents addressing issues around strip mining in their community. And as the organization grew outside of the coal fields, they've taken on different issues that, because it's a member-driven organization, so their issues have expanded beyond coal stuff. So some folks work on, like in Middle Tennessee, they're getting equitable funding for Head Start programs, or racism in the media, or water quality. The Bedford chapter successfully fought a HAPO, concentrated animal feed operation. So the SOCM market is pretty diverse from this because its member group is pretty diverse also. And so Southern Alliance for Clean Energy they do a lot of research and organizing and advocacy. And so it's a kind of different model. My bosses like to joke about it. So Steve Smith at SACE says, he's like, well, I hire people and I tell them what to do. It's a relatively flat organization. And Amelia Parker said, I hire people and they tell me what to do. So it's an interesting partnership between the two because SOCM does a lot of community organizing and SACE focuses a lot on research and organizing and advocacy stuff. So they've come together in this project where we're exploring what does it look like when we try to organize in Tennessee through public utilities, and particularly rural electric cooperatives for different, to support different campaigns. So a little bit on that. So what we're dealing with is public power. So generally, people who live in the U.S. Get power from distributors, different utilities, and some of them are investor-owned utilities, and so they're companies like Duke Energy or Georgia Power, like Southern Company. So there's like a board, and they make decisions. The profit goes to them. And then there's public power, and so then you have some of them are municipal. So those are like Knoxville Utility Board here, the Jellicoe Electric System, Nashville Electric Service, and so they're more like kind of extensions of local government, but still public, and there is some mechanism for them to participate and have an effect on some decision-making processes. And then lastly is cooperatives, so a lot of the rural electric cooperatives. And so members actually have a direct stake in decision-making processes in the cooperatives as member owners of the co-ops. So a little bit on that. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, 30% of the nation's homes are powered through public utilities. Yeah, there's been a lot of work happening around public power recently, particularly around, so in the South there's been a lot of work like reforming public utilities, and then out West there's been a big push to like municipalize private power, and so the great contracts or buy themselves out and then turn the private, kick out the investor-owned utilities and establish a public power system. So there's a lot of activity happening across the country around this kind of work. And we'll talk about some more of that later. So in Tennessee, all the public utilities and in some of the surrounding states as well, they get their power from TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. So it's a corporation owned by the U.S. government and provides electricity for 9 million people in 7 states. That's Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, West Virginia, and North Carolina, and most of Tennessee. And so there's their electricity generation portfolio, primarily nuclear and coal and gas, and there's some hydro and just a drop of solar. But this project is really based around, like the pilot project we're looking at organizing through Tennessee. So that's where the majority of TVA is. So the way TVA is set up is that most of the power goes to distributors, but they have 57 direct customers, and so there'll be like maybe a university, or it will be like a big factory of some sort, and so TVA directly sends power to them. But most of their power goes to 155 distributors all across those 7 states, and then those distributors then pass on the electricity to their residents. And so there's also this third party, the TVPPA, the Tennessee Valley Public Power Association, and it was an organization formed by distributors, and it's a way for them to get together and kind of advocate for their member issues and then distributor issues towards TVA, and then also different governmental processes. All right, so this is what that looks like. Yeah.
So TVA doesn't sell to any any investor utilities?
Well, they sell to private stuff, because some of the, there are manufacturing plants that get their stuff from TVA, but all the distributors in TVA are public. They're either cooperative or unions.
Yeah, they sell some assets.
Cool, so there's a map of that. You see most of it's in Tennessee, but there's some that bleeds out all over.
And they buy it to,
Yeah, so, yeah, most of this work is centered around organizing through rural electric cooperatives, and to state that again, member owners have more of a direct stake in a cooperative because they're actual owners of their utilities, right? And so that means that they can pass resolutions, they can vote, they can go to open board meetings, they can access records and that kind of stuff as owners, and direct the operations of this entity. And so there's still a relationship with public utilities and munis, but it's not as a big power stake there.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
are there differences in the way the co-ops and the munis are operated because of state laws?
Oh, that's a
No, that's like their own choosing with their own bylaws.
Well, each individual utility has their own bylaws, and a lot of them are kind of the same. Some of them you kind of use a cookie cutter, but because they're part of TVA, there's a specific set of stuff that they kind of adhere to. But yeah, different utilities and cooperative like that is just a mishmash. It's not really a concrete thing. There's no real regulatory body around all.
Yeah, and so the state they happen to be in, whether it's Mississippi or Tennessee, that doesn't, they're still operating much the same.
It's because they're
Thank you.
TVA stuff. Yeah, that's where a lot of their regulation comes from, is their relationship to TVA. Yeah, so so the majority of the work that we're doing is around the electric cooperatives, and so we're going to talk a bit about that. So a lot of the co-ops in the South came from the New Deal, and so the first one was in Corinth, Mississippi, and then the next 3 or 4 years after that, there were thousands that sprung up all over. And so it was, right, so the reason that they saw this need was a lot of the private utility companies were kind of skipping over rural areas. Because the population density wasn't there for them to pull a big profit. And so most of them stuck to the cities and that kind of stuff. And so there's this need to, create these services in rural areas all over the South, all over the country really. And so they started this program to address that. And so within 20 years, 90% of the service area was covered, and then the 9% of it came in the next few years. They're pretty effective. Like no one had laid that much copper or brought that much power to so many people and covered so much area in such a little time. So there's a big distinction between public and private. And that kind of speaks to a lot of the activity around the interest in public utilities. Folks kind of see the success of public utilities in terms of disaster response and support for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And so they see it as a better relationship, and they tend to be lower bills for residents and that kind of stuff. So even early on, there was that distinction that set these public utilities apart from private. And they weren't simply, it wasn't just simply there was, I pay my bill and the light comes on, right? It was a community institution and a lot came out of it. There was so much money that a lot of the cooperative money goes to public education and then community services and that kind of stuff. And so they had these big town meetings. And so the way people talk about it is just this big, huge community thing, almost like a revival. I've heard people talk about that in Alabama. So these membership town meetings are not simply business sessions. They have an emotional overtone, a spiritual meaning to people who were so long denied the benefits of modern energy and convenience, which have become a commonplace for city neighbors. And so, it was a big part of your life in a rural area. And so there's a picture of that on the Anson Wire. And today, it's a completely different relationship. It's more as long as one person pays their bill and the light comes on, both parties are happy, right? And then even the face, what a rural electric co-op looks like is completely different. So there are rural electric cooperatives in the Atlanta metro area in DC, right? And so the way that works is a lot of the like the federal regulations around that, like the policy is that once you're rural, you're always rural in regards to this particular program. And so they've retained that, and they still have access to certain financing systems and funding sources and stuff. And then, so before it was this democratically like driven like community process, right, where you had direct stake and you would attend your board meetings, and it was a big thing, right? There was annual, there was monthly. People would cook and have a big like 2-day celebration, right? And now there's like it's a little bit of both. It's folks as you know through the generations, people have less and less of a relationship to that. But then there's also on the other end like local people in power kind of entrenched and are really benefiting from that relationship and keeping certain people from participating in that process. And so like there's been emphasis on higher cooperative revenues, you know, over lowering member electricity bills. And so even though like some people are like, oh, there's no money in public utilities, like we're not really growing. It's you know in 2008 it was $30 billion in equity.
Is that national or?
Yeah, national. Yeah, and I'll get to that more of that later. But a lot of that is the way that works is a certain amount of that. There's a ratio to like how much they have and then how much they have to give back, and how much they have and then how much they're growing and what they use and all that. And anything above that threshold is stuff that they have to pay back to members. It's stuff they're owed, right? And so it's supposed to keep cooperatives from like you know holding on to money, and so the money's supposed to be used to maintain and grow service, and it's being used to like pad incomes and hire people's friends and that kind of stuff. And that's it's more extreme in some places than other places, but that's the general relationship is split like that, and like it's a pretty big deal. There's $3 to $9 billion nationally just sitting in equity that is actually owed to community members, and it's on average like $1,612 owed to every member of a cooperative nationwide. So that's a lot of money, you know, pretty important thing in a rural community. So yeah, so in some places it's actually pretty awful. There's been some places in Alabama that like operated as private entities, and some people like, oh, actually you don't have access to your bylaws. You actually can't come to meetings. You can't participate. You can't vote. You can't run. You can't do anything, right? And so that shows up different ways throughout the country. In Atlanta is a particularly notable example. This is kind of where SACE and SOCM got this idea to invest in this project and kind of explore it in Tennessee. And so there's Cobb EMC sold. So there was like an exchange. So there's this really complicated process where essentially this other company was created, and then like so the real thing that happened was this guy, and he'd been doing it for 10, 15 years, was like slowly siphoning money from this this electric membership corporation in different ways, and one of them was the creation of this fake company, and then that company managed the public utility, and it was a private company managing the public utility, and then the rates went up like all down, and people were like furious, and then there was like money being thrown into a new coal-fired plant in the Atlanta area, and so different cooperatives were signed onto that plant and investing in it, even though there was no real need for it, and there was no, like the people building it didn't have experience with it, and so that was a third company that was created that also had a relationship with this guy, Dwight Brown, and so eventually what happened was members were sick of it. And so it was a lot of membership and stuff, and then some worked with SACE and Southern Energy Network and different organizations, but a lot of it really came from the members themselves. And eventually what happened was they overthrew the boards of a few of the cooperatives and got them to, so that they kicked people off the boards, put in folks who were, you know, supporting like open transparency and democratic processes, and essentially got folks to pull out of all of this. And so that guy was thrown in prison. All four of the EMCs that pulled out, that was more than half of what was invested in the plant, and the rest of them that are still in the plant are pulling out, and they're like severing their intent to purchase contracts. And so technically there's still a plant in Washington, and if you go to the website, it's still being built, but no one's supporting it and no one's going to buy the power, so it's a dead plant walking. Yes?
How did they do that? Some of these co-ops are like little feudal kingdoms, fiefdoms that are very protective of the power and not very subject to being taken back by the owners.
Right, that's a really good point. So I think a lot of that was kind of facilitated by these outside organizations who really broke the story, you know, across the country. And so like that, like it's hard to like maintain that kind of a control when it's the headline of the AJC every day for a month, right? Because it's just like once it started, it just snowballed, more and more and more came out of it. But then like, so even that, like there's still this relationship that says like the way the bylaws were written, it still kept people from participating and kept people from actually engaging with their public utility, right? And so the community members there early on like realized that what they had to do first wasn't to like, oh, we're gonna stop this corruption, oh, we're gonna stop this coal plant. Like, no, we need to reform the way the cooperative operates, right? And so we need to have fair and open elections, so we had to change it to include like a mailing ballot, or they have to have open board meetings or access to bylaws. And then once they got that through, that's when they were actually able to, because it was like so much of the cooperative was stacked towards the incumbent, and that's the way they want it. And so they had to knock a lot of that out before they can actually really change what they wanted to see. So there's some of that base work that happened on the ground with the community members. Pretty cool stuff. Yeah, so it mobilized all sorts of stuff happening, including like 300 citizens doing the only EPD permit hearing for that, and most of them in opposition to it. So pretty cool stuff. Yeah, so that's kind of what that looks like, what that looked like in Atlanta, and we'll talk a little bit about in Tennessee, and then what folks can do in their own public utilities. But now we're going to hear from Lauren about the Green Collar Jobs Committee in Stockholm and how they see this as an opportunity to develop their project.
Okay.
Any questions before we move on? Awesome.
So, I, Secretary-elect of SOCA, as well as SOCM's Board of Directors, and on the Green Collar Jobs Committee, our vision is to ensure family-supporting jobs with workers' rights, which strengthen our communities and provide pathways out of poverty in an equitable, sustainable, clean energy economy in Tennessee. So while we're working on this co-op work, we need to keep in mind that many of these areas that are rural are impoverished, where if they lose their home, if they can't, if it is on fire, they can't even rebuild. Like when I went to Mont Eagle, we went through some of the most rural counties in the state, some of the most impoverished in like Grundy and Fentress County, which are dependent on volunteer firemen and co-ops. They didn't have, they had limited resources. They depended on volunteers, like those who run the co-ops. So we need to keep in mind that we need to utilize advocating for our shift in our co-ops to sustainable policies, that we also create green jobs, because 2/3 of green jobs in Tennessee have not required a high school degree. They require on-the-job training, weatherization, which can be another topic. Okay, well here's an example of a local green job, and here's Tennessee's job numbers. Like here you can see we have energy efficiency, which is advocated through our some of our local distributors. Like some opt out of the Green Power Switch program. Tom, did you have any comment?
Oh, I'll follow it up. Yeah.
Okay, so we have Green Power Switch in Tennessee, as some of you may know of, or Green Power Providers. And we have other programs in the state. So it supports like renewables and our energy efficiency. So we have a total of 43,000 green jobs in the state, besides just focusing on the about 9,000 energy efficiency jobs.
Is that chart available on the internet?
Oh, yes, it is.
Thank you.
It's from the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development.
Okay,
Their green job study.
thanks.
That's their most recent numbers.
Cool. So, yeah, a lot of the work the reason that, one of the biggest reasons Southern Alliance for Clean Energy is invested in this project is they're interested in looking at what members and residents in Tennessee can do to shift policies at the distributor level and through TVA. And so as Lauren was talking about, there's no, it's not like line-wide, everyone participates in like the green power blocks, green power switch, or power providers, or any of that stuff. Some distributors choose to opt out, and so it's an opportunity for members to engage with their local utility and then get them to participate in these programs. But then also, through all the distributors working together in TVPPA, the Tennessee Valley Public Power Association, that's where a lot of the punch is coming from, is this organization engaging directly with TVA to get them to increase their solar power, or to get them to put more funds in their energy efficiency work and that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of what Green Collar Job is focused on, is using a lot of the research we've been doing to advocate for these policies that members are interested in doing. But this project it's pretty awesome, because it doesn't matter who you are or where you are or what you're interested in doing, as long as you're a community member and you're with a public utility. There's a lot of space for you to do and support the kind of work you want to do, whether it's education and community development work. There's a lot of equity and a lot of power in this relationship. And so our folks in Middle Tennessee are using it for kind of they're using it to complement their work with local government and getting community members in the area to participate in local government and do stuff. In Kentucky, they're using it for things like renewable energy efficiency, and that kind of stuff. But the members that are working on this in Tennessee are having a huge range of issues, and they just see a lot of potential in this model. And so, in particularly reforming it so that the relationship is a lot more beneficial to community members.
Because
So earlier you said there's $30 billion in equity nationwide in cooperatives.
Mm-hmm.
What's an average number for cooperatives in Tennessee for equity?
Yeah, I don't have that number because it's
Yeah.
really hard to find out. A lot of the information that I've done through the research is a lot of industry stuff, a lot of stuff that took years to get. Yeah, a lot of stuff that was prohibitively.
And it's highly variable. Some of the co-ops are very, very small.
Right. Some are really large. too,
Louise
so-
Grenflo did a lot of work on that. I don't know if you've been in touch with her, but she has lists, I think, of the different co-ops, and but it's a wide range of some of them quite wealthy and with a lot of retained earnings, which they're not supposed to have, and some are very, very small.
Yeah, it's a conversation we've been having about how to get access to that, and that's kind of one of the things that when we work with community members, that's something they can request, or that might be a project that they take on, is look and see exactly how much of a return, how much is being concentrated and how much is owed to members, and kind of start having that conversation. But some of that's it's a little more further down the road.
But that's where we need your help too, is to get those bylaws, because not every rural co-op has a website. So we need your help with what's the most up to date, when are the meetings, because they're not always publicly posted like there should be.
Yeah, so the research we've been doing around the TVA specific ones, because this project can be applied all over any public utility, but the pilot is working through Tennessee and TVA. We have, for each 155 distributors, we have 70 bits of information, depending on, it's how many residential customers they had last year or the year before, or how many people participate in Green Power Switch, or how many kilowatt hours did they save in energy efficiency. And then using that has been pretty fruitful for us in kind of directing the energy and looking where there's potential, and then looking who's already doing a really good job. And so some of that stuff, the public meetings, it's kind of available through local government, if it's a muni. And the co-ops are hard to find either because they're not letting it go, or some of them don't have, their websites aren't that hot, so they're not really easy to find. But we have the majority of that information too from industry stuff, stuff that they willingly give the TVPPA. So we do have a lot of information about those. Right.
Well, we also like to hear what members do hear from the local co-ops when they do go to meetings. Okay.
So, so looking at the work that happened in Atlanta, and then looking at the questions that the SACA members are asking in Tennessee as they're starting to engage in this process, and then similar projects in Virginia and Kentucky, like you've seen like down the line is like that initial, like before you can do anything, before you can advocate for education programs in the community or energy efficiency. Like what you need is you need to look at these things, how open and participating democratic is your cooperative. And so it's just like, can they make decisions without the consent of members? You know, are the elections fair? Are they stacked? Can you even like run a candidate? You know, like do you need 4/5 of the cooperative to sign a sheet of paper before you can become a candidate? You know, can you attend meetings? Can you access information? And so that's a lot of the information that SACA members are working on getting, just to kind of gauge how open, because you know some of them are pretty good, and some of them might not be. And so it's just kind of that base level, and then once you assess that, then you can start advocating for these things and building relationships, and maybe even running campaigns or passing resolutions. And that looks different depending on who you are and what community you're in and what you want to work on. But it's pretty cool. I like that. It's just building a really cool power base with community members in Tennessee. Because this project is nothing. It's just this relationship. The structure exists today and has been existed since the 30s, right? But the thing that makes it special is that typical community members in Tennessee or anyone in a public utility can exercise their power in this thing that already exists, right? And to support whatever thing they want to work on. So that's cool. So there's just some action items for different things if folks are interested. We have folks working on these different things too. And so we can talk about other examples or answer other questions. So.
Well, I can give an example of a member's experience when he went to a meeting at Volunteer Electric. He tried to find out about the meeting, and it turned out that everything they were going to say was already planned, and it's really, their annual meeting is basically a meet and greet, and they've had the same board members continuously, and you can see on some of the websites where you can't even find where, like on Volunteer, it's not clear how you find out when is their meeting until right before. And so when he was there, all they were doing was offering food for customers. And they really, at these meetings, they expect hardly anyone to show up. So it's fine with them if they just have like 2 people show up and they just continue paying themselves, as Thomas mentioned previously.
Yeah, well that's really like the most egregious examples, like in Atlanta was one of them. One of them, actually, COB EMC, it had been several years since it even had an election, but that's not the case for all public utilities. Some are better than others. Some are pretty great actually, but that's why it's important to see, like to do, for community members who are interested in engaging this work, just to do some initial research, and just to kind of feel out the playing field and see what that looks like.
How many co-ops do you have active engagement and following at that level?
Less than 10. But there's a few, depending on, some people are at the level of like, they're thinking about running campaigns, right? And other folks are at the level of just simply just attending a meeting, seeing how it seeing the feeling, right? So, but 7 to 10 or so. And they're kind of all over. And so there's some that members are interested in, and some that, depending on what the project is, like, so it's like some would be really good, or some need to be better, or some one has a strategic relationship with TVA, or like we have a lot of members here and they want to push for this, and so yeah, they're kind of all over Tennessee, but it's less than 10. Kind of a new project.
Do you know if the co-ops are controlled by TVA in terms of the retail price they can sell the electricity to their customers, or is there variability in the TVA system?
I'm trying to remember what that looks like.
I can't remember either.
Yeah.
Who sets TVA's rate? Like, is there
TVA sets
there's not like
TVA.
like
yeah,
a
there's
Virginia,
sort
there's a
of,
state
there
corporation
is some
commission that-
sort of regulation, sort of not really. It's really complicated.
Right.
The TVA board oversees
Oh,
TVA.
TVA is a state unto themselves.
Essentially. But yeah, it is interesting. It isn't like there's this big like monolithic thing that it's like residents and everyone else. Because there's TVA and what it does is weird and specific in here, and then there's the distributors and what they do is weird and specific and all over, and then there's the entity that they aggregate it to, TVPPA, the Public Power Association, and then the community members themselves, whether you're a small cooperative or a bigger cooperative or where you are in the state or what your members want, it's a completely different picture in every one of those. Like sometimes distributors want things that TVPPA doesn't want, or vice versa, but like, yeah, it's complicated.
At the beginning, excuse me, you mentioned that there were 57 direct customers and 154 unis. When you said that, the 154, does that include the co-ops?
Yeah, so.
So what's the breakout in
I'm trying to
that?
think, I think it's almost half and half.
Okay.
The majority of Tennessee is covered by cooperatives, but I think like about half of the distributors are co-op and the other half are union.
Yeah, it's obviously Knoxville
It's
is.
pretty close, yeah, and Knoxville, union.
Okay, so
It's like either that or a third, I can pull it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
just, I was wondering.
Yeah, but the majority of Tennessee and the surface area of Tennessee, the majority of the country is covered by co-ops, but most of the people are in unions. Concentrate density issue. Cool. Yep.
So are you guys trying to get them to switch to different kinds of energy, and if so, what kinds?
Yeah, so that's not really, the way SOCM works is it's a member-driven organization, and they work on the issues that members vocalize and the problems that they see, and then like, so they kind of work on the solutions they want to see. So this project isn't, so speaking as in my capacity, working with SOCM, it's just helping to illuminate this relationship and then facilitate people working through this, right, for whatever program they want to work on. Right? Different chapters do completely different things, and so, but some of them, like green collar jobs, are interested in things like, renewable energy and that kind of stuff. SACE, their policy is they want to transition off of high risk things, so like coal and nuclear, and so they support wind and solar, of course. And SOCM, two different organizations, two different. It's interesting. Like the overlap is where like what the members want and where SACE is, and it's an interesting relationship. But SOCM's got different, like so like they're against strip mining, but not necessarily underground mining. But then that's a conversation in itself too that's been happening in SOCM for a decade, right? And then talking about other types of extraction too is a conversation. And so like SOCM has a position against fracking, but there isn't a clear one against natural gas because the membership is still kind of having these conversations in themselves. So if that answers.
Yeah, well, let me follow up, and then I'd love to hear what she has to say as well. So I know SACE is very compromised on their positions with different types of energy, especially on biomass, but also on some other things. And so I'm interested in knowing, are you seeing or hearing about proposals for natural gas power plants or for biomass incineration? And when you say renewable energy, are your members, or if they're pushing for that, are any of them thinking that that's in the renewable green column, or are they opposing it? And what's that look like?
Yeah, there's a split within the SOCM membership about that, and I can't really speak too much about the SACE side. I do a lot of more work through SOCM. My capacity with SACE has been a lot of research, but there are different groups in SOCM that work on different stuff, and so one of them is the green collar jobs, and so they have actually specific stances on this stuff. If you want
Sure.
to
Yeah, that's what we advocate for in the Green Collar Jobs Committee, is for things like solar and energy efficiency and removing barriers for people in the industry. Just like earlier this year in Tennessee, we were working on the solar application issue in the state where all of the solar companies had a limited time to submit their applications, and they said that their application quota basically was full in an hour.
Yeah, and so part of that what's happening is that, just to speak to that a little bit, is that TVA is like, they're doing a lot of, they say they're doing a lot of great stuff, and a lot of stuff they do is okay. But then like, as these programs are increasing, the demand for them increases, like they've kind of been scaling back and cutting programs and just, we're like eliminating some entirely. And so that's kind of the reason that Green Collar Jobs is interested in this model, is trying to get TVA to stop cutting them and just expand them instead. Whether that's like financing for having solar panels on your house, or being able to purchase renewable energy like blocks through your utility, and that kind of stuff.
But I would say most SOCM members do have an interest in energy efficiency and renewables, even if it's not their primary issue they're working on. Like there's also the E3 committee that works on energy extraction.
Yeah, they used to do a lot of strip mining work, and now doing a lot of fracking, particularly like on public lands and that kind of stuff. But SOCM membership it's a conversation that's happening, but it's a conversation that's shifting every day.
So are there any proposals in the region for these, I guess, or biomass plants that you're hearing about?
Like, what do you mean? like,
Is anyone trying to build new natural gas power plants or convert this existing power plants to natural gas or to biomass? I hear TVA is trying to switch some coal plants over to biomass, and some of, we run a
haven't heard
national
much
network of
concrete,
this
like-
grassroots opposition to biomass incinerators. We're working on building one on natural gas power plants, so we'd love to work with folks who are doing that. I don't know, like, are any of your members on either side of the line fighting or promoting either of these things?
I think that's an issue that's been in the back burner, but, I mean, I've heard about them trying to convert to natural gas, so I'd like to stay in touch with you after the conference.
On the issue of green jobs, I know, and this is several years ago, that the official figures from federal figures that the state bases their figures on included jobs at nuclear power plants as green jobs. That came from the federal government. And I don't know if that's still the case, but I think it's important to look at the criteria because some of those green jobs are bogus. And I would argue all day long that calling a nuclear power plant job a green job is a disservice to the whole idea of green jobs. So just kind of for your information, because I don't think that's a commonly known part of those statistics. I don't really know if it's still the case.
right, yeah, the folks I work with in East Tennessee and Alabama, they're not, yeah, it's interesting. It's like, what is a green job and what does it mean for my community? And like, they're not really, and I can't speak for soccer membership, but in the work I've done, like they're like, we want jobs. They can be green or whatever, but I need a great paying job. I need something that's fulfilling, and so that's, yeah, I like that there's nuance in this, that folks can pursue whatever kind of project that they want, environmental or otherwise, as long as it's a member-driven thing.
Any comments or questions?
Well, so I just wanted to quickly share I don't know how familiar folks are with MESA, with the Mountain Association for Community Economic Development in Kentucky, but they've also been doing co-op reform work, and if this is something you want to hear more about, I'd look into their project. And one of their recent successes has been getting a test case for on-bill financing for home weatherization and energy efficiency. That's like, I think it's a really good model, and hopefully, so far the state regulatory body has been fairly sympathetic, or at least not obstructionary, which is a relief in the South. I know in Virginia, it's really tough to work with that body. So, yeah.
I second that. Mesa's awesome. That program's cool. I saw them talk about it earlier this year. It's pretty punk rock. And then also KTC, I would look into them. Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, they've done a lot of really great work around rural electric cooperative reform, particularly around renewable energy and that kind of stuff. So. And, I've got tons of documents around this kind of stuff, particularly if folks are interested in case studies or looking at kind of a step-by-step, looking at best practices of the campaign and that kind of stuff. So pretty interesting stuff. Cool. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.